Everyone
shortcut
remembers
to
the day
California.
when George
Safer, they
Donner
say.
first
Safer,
read the
is it
promise
true?
of a faster
We
road
leave at
west.
dawn.
It was
The cutoff is
1846,
set.
and
We print at
hundreds of
dawn.
families were
Understood.
answering
The
the
type
call
is
to
locked.
California
Good.
and
No
Oregon.
delays.
Among them were 87 souls who bound their futures to wagons, maps, and a brochure written by a man named Lansford Hastings. Hastings' shortcut, the now infamous Hastings Cutoff,
The river crossing is
glittered on
marked here.
paper
We
as
head
a
that way
path
at
to
dawn.
speed
Will
and
we make
salvation.
it before the rains?
What
will.
followed was neither speed nor salvation, but a slow, cold collapse into horror. This is a documentary-style
The river
account
crossing
of
here
how
is our best
ambition,
chance. But
bad
the terrain is
judgment,
difficult. We
and
must
a
be cautious.
deliberate
Agreed. We move at
misrepresentation of
first
terrain turned a migration into a massacre. The Donner Party left Illinois in May 1846 as part of a wave of westward movement. Hastings, an energetic self-promoter, had
The water
published
here is
advice
good.
that the
We should
Great
push on.
Basin and a
Agreed.
crossing
The
south
mountains by
of the Great
nightfall.
Salt Lake were manageable. He never traveled the route himself with the Donner Column. His guidebook did. Historians debate his motives, but the record is clear. His endorsement convinced a cluster of emigrant families to turn off the established California Trail and into a landscape he had described as passable. That decision would become the axis of the conspiracy. Hastings had reasons to push his route. He sought settlers for California
The border
and
is
an
close.
entrepreneurial
We'll be
place for
safe soon.
himself.
But what if
His
they find
guidebook and
us?
public
They won't,
advocacy
I
made the
promise.
cutoff sound quicker and easier than it was. When the Donner Party took that advice, the shortcut turned into a nightmare. Delays in the Wasatch Desert, weeks of slow progress around the Great Salt Lake, and loss of livestock and supplies. By late October, the wagon train reached the Sierra Nevada. Then, a historically early and violent winter set in. Snow fell in relentless sheets. The
The old
emigrants,
texts speak of
trapped near a
trials we must
small
endure.
alpine lake, now
And
known
endure
as
we
Donner
shall,
Lake,
united.
found their wagons immobilized, their animals dead, and their food exhausted. What followed is recorded in clutching, stark primary sources, above all the diary of Patrick Breen, one of the survivors. Men, women, and children froze to death in cabins and makeshift shelters. Starvation shortened the days. Fever and scurvy hollowed faces. Leadership frayed into blame. Most desperate of all was the cannibalism that began not as wickedness, but as a brutal calculus of survival. When bodies lay unburied under ice and no other food remained, those who survived ate the dead. The Forlorn Hope, a small group that set out on foot to fetch help, walked through deep snow for weeks. Some of them, too, ate the flesh of their companions to keep moving. These details are not sensational additions, but well-documented facts from letters, court records, and survivor testimony collected in the months after the rescues. The conspiracy, then, is twofold. First was the
Ready? Let's
calculated
move.
deceit of
On three.
Hastings,
One, two,
a man
three.
whose
Good.
pamphlet
Keep 'em
sold
steady.
dreams of a
Easy
quick
there, big
road
fella.
while concealing the reality of an untried and brutal route. He did not accompany the emigrants to correct his advice. He left the caravan to its fate, and his name became attached to the death of many. Second was the
Everyone stop. We have a
conspiratorial
problem.
cascade
The
of
supply
poor
chain is
choices
compromised.
within
We need
the
to
party
mobilize
itself.
now.
Decisions to delay,
Gentlemen, the path is
to
clear.
split
We
forces,
move at dawn.
to leave
Through the
wagons
pass, it
buried
is
in
heavily
snow
guarded. We
that
have the element of
magnified the
surprise.
initial deception into catastrophe. Relief parties eventually came from the California settlements in February and March 1847. Of the 87 who had set out, 48 survived to be carried down the mountain. Some survivors faced a lifetime of stigma. Others, like Tamsin Donner, chose to stay with the dying
We have to
and
keep
never
moving.
left.
I
The
know,
country
but I'm
would
so
argue over
tired.
responsibility.
something
Was it
ahead.
nature, negligence, or a deliberate bait and switch by a man selling a shortcut? Modern historians place blame collectively on Hastings' reckless advocacy and on a chain of human errors, but the image of a smiling pamphleteer and a snowbound party remains a moral lesson. The Donner Party's winter at Truckee Lake became a specter in American memory, a warning about unchecked ambition, the fragility of community under stress, and the way a single false promise can be the hinge of catastrophe. The bones are long gone, the lake still bears the name, but the documents remain. Diaries, court records, and Hastings' own guide, and they keep the conspiracy from settling into myth. The horror was real. The decision to follow a shortcut written to flatter an ego turned a westering dream into one of the darkest chapters of 19th century America.